Hi, I'm Tom Scholey, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics and Fantastic Four Grand Design, and the author of Superpowers for DC's Young Animal line. Superpowers is a body of work that I'm immensely proud of and that sort of stands apart from some of my other work for a number of reasons. Just to give you a little context for it, Gerard Way started a pop-up imprint for DC Comics called Young Animal, like an alternative take on DC Comics properties. I pitched him the idea of me doing Superpowers. This was pretty late in the development stages of the Young Animal line, but he was happy to have me aboard, and we threw a bunch of ideas back and forth. It was a lot of fun. That's kind of my favorite part of comics, is those like early idea sessions, sort of, sketching and just letting it all flow. The rest of making comics is a lot of work, which again, I enjoy the work too, but the sort of planning is just sort of pure joy. And so the idea is that I would do sort of my take on Superpowers, the Jack Kirby miniseries that was based on the cartoon and the toys of the same name from the early 80s. As this project developed, it became apparent from DC editorial that there's certain characters that I'll have access to and not have access to. So I did not have access to all the characters from, the original Superpowers thing. So I had to, regroup a number of times, but still, found interesting solutions, figured out ways to take these sort of like third tier characters and make them, relevant and interesting. They're in this book. Cave Carson has a cybernetic eye, and my name is nowhere on the cover because when you do backup stories, that's just how it goes. The backup stories are considered something extra, something thrown in, to make you enjoy the ride a little bit more, but they're not sort of, broadcast on the cover. Something I hadn't really thought of when I agreed to do backup stories. It's a little bit of a bummer when you have a new comic out that you're immensely proud of and your name's not on the cover, but that's fine. I was really excited about the idea of doing backup stories because to me, it's like the pressure is off. You can just have fun. It's up to, the guys who do the headline book to sort of, make or break the book. But the backup, you can just hang back and do your thing and, nobody's going to get in your way. Now, initially, it was going to be 4-page backup stories. I was going to do 4 pages, but as, numbers were crunched and whatnot, it was decided that it would be 3 pages. It's hard enough to do a compelling story in 4 pages, but 3 pages, that really was cutting down to the bone. But as a result, I developed a new style of sort of hyper compressed comic storytelling, and I'm really proud of it. With this series, I was just coming off of Transformers versus G.I. Joe, where I just put an immense amount of effort into the preparation of the comic, and I did the same with Superpowers. I put this tremendous effort into Transformers versus G.I. Joe to create 15 issues of 20-some page comics. So I was putting that same effort into a 3-page comic. So it's really bursting at the seams, and kind of showed me just how far you can push the vocabulary of comics. Another thing that sets this work apart for me is it's really the only comic I've done where I didn't get to do everything I set out to do. It was cut short. It ran for 6 issues, and then editorial pulled the plug on it. In preparation of this series, I had written years worth of material. This really was a dream job for me to be able to use those Jack Kirby concepts and just some of the other greatest hits of DC Comics. In a lot of ways, I felt at home in that DC universe. It kind of fit the tone of my work, of sort of the balance of sort of seriousness and silliness. Ideas were just flowing. So there's a certain frustration there that I just have, this immense amount of material and only got to really, show the world a tiny fraction of it. And that's very different from Transformers versus G.I. Joe, where I was able to do pretty much everything I set out to do. And the same with GoBots. I got to do everything I set out to do on GoBots. And the same is true of Fantastic Four Grand Design. I got to do everything I set out to do on that project. This series has sort of stayed with me in a way. I just, I continue to work on some of those concepts I had developed for this. And some of them I've repurposed, for use in my own creator-owned comics. But, this was really, a special time in my life that didn't go exactly the way I had planned or had hoped. But, I was very happy with what did make it to the page. So I'm going to skip ahead. So, the main body of this book is Cave Carson has a cybernetic eye, but the back of the book belongs to me. It's this is the entirety of the published superpowers stories that I did. So, people often ask, how do I get these superpower stories? And it's, well, you can collect the individual issues of Cave Carson, but if you get the Cave Carson Volume 1 trade paperback, you'll get every page of it, and all grouped together. Now, my name did not show up on the cover, but I made sure to make my name sort of prominent throughout the comic itself. So we begin on the planet Exor with the birth of twins. When I was trying to figure out what to do with superpowers, once it became clear that I wouldn't be able to do, what my initial idea was, basically like this all-out war between the Justice League and Jack Kirby's Fourth World, which was, in a nutshell, what Jack Kirby's initial superpowers story was. It was late in Kirby's career. He wasn't writing the issues. He wrote one of the issues, which also just happened to be the best of the issues. And, as somebody who grew up with that cartoon and those toys, and then becoming a Jack Kirby fan, I was, disappointed because what I had imagined this, Jack Kirby Superpowers comic to be, it ended up being not that. And of course, I enjoyed that book on its own terms, but I wanted to do a series that delivered on the promise of the idea of, wow, Jack Kirby doing a Justice League story and having them go toe-to-toe with his, greatest creations, sign me up. So when it became apparent that I wouldn't be allowed to do that because it would require access to certain characters that I just wasn't allowed access to, I thought of, okay, what's my backup plan? What else can I do with superpowers that's still true to the superpowers name? And Wonder Twins, the Wonder Twins were a very memorable element of those, Super Friends, Superpowers cartoons. And so I thought maybe I'll make a series about the Wonder Twins. Now, that was one element of this, but, as it developed, I realized, okay, I'm not just going to do a series about the Wonder Twins. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series about the Wonder Twins, but part of the Wonder Twins world is that I was going to switch back and forth between the Wonder Twins story and then this sort of more, standard, Earthbound DC universe story that I was going to tell. And as the series goes on, you find that the Wonder Twins are Earth superhero fans. They're from the planet Exor. They're royalty, and they like to watch these holovids of superhero stories from Earth. Now, it's not spelled out whether what they're watching are shows or whether what they're watching, is really transpiring on Earth. My idea for the Wonder Twins planet, what it would look like, and I made it sort of a twin planet, and then I thought just like, what the technology would look like and things, and I thought, make it like an Alice in Wonderland, like a 1800s kind of world. It just seemed like the right fit, something to set it apart from just like the more standard, Star Wars sort of sci-fi. And so so then I have 3 pages. So I do 2 pages of Wonder Twins story, and their powers are only just now starting to manifest. Jaina, who's the twin who turns into various animals, she starts to get sort of like a rash and bumps that start to develop on her face. She's the twin who from the show, can turn into animals. And then Zan is the twin who can turn into various forms of water. So he all of a sudden he starts like sweating a lot. And then there's Gleek, their pet blue monkey. It was Gerard's suggestion that maybe all the wildlife on Exor are blue. So initially I had these sort of like white tigers with these sort of unicorn tigers, but I thought that was a good suggestion to make them blue instead. Their parents are the king and queen, and then they have this sort of creepy advisor to the king, sort of like Jafar in Aladdin or something, and called the Sphinx. And now the Sphinx, again, the characters I was sort of not allowed to use were, I wanted to use Darkseid. I couldn't use Darkseid, so I looked through the old materials, and there was an old House of Secrets sci-fi story that Jack Kirby did about the Sphinx, and he was this sort of robed, mysterious character. So I sort of took that and completely recontextualized that character, but it was a nice basic Kirby visual. Since the entire series is all in one here, printed nicely on nice toothy paper. I couldn't be happier about the presentation here. It reads as one continuous story, but initially it came out in groupings of 3. The 2 Wonder Twins stories, and then the sort of Earthbound superhero story. Now, also a way I thought of getting around the fact that I couldn't use certain characters was I thought, Superpowers, it was this toy line, they had all these vehicles and action figures. Maybe the characters that I can't use, I'll use their vehicles. So you never see the Joker. At least you never see his face, but you never see the Joker. But you do see the Joker-mobile, which has a giant Joker face on it. And again, this page is 20-some panels, and that again was a problem-solving thing of like, let me how do I fit all the story I want to tell into 3 pages? And I thought of this idea of these sort of cinematic transitions, how effective that would be if you have 7 panels next to each other with this slow development. The other thing is I didn't have access to Batman or Superman, so I thought, well, let's put the emphasis on the sort of sidekicks or derivative characters. So it's like I'll put the emphasis on Batgirl instead of Batman, and so it creates a nice narrative tension of you see the bat signal, you see the Joker, you expect Batman to show up, but instead it's Batgirl. And I sort of had this concept for Batgirl, kind of retro and kind of fun, but where the sort of glasses that she wears in civilian life and that sort of librarian symbolism, to incorporate that into her costume. So she's got a pair of glasses, and for her to ride a BMX bike. In the 60s TV show, she rode a motorcycle, and that was carried on into the comics as well. So I thought, a BMX bike, because again, Superpowers is coming out of the 80s. This is kind of like a retro project, and that's sort of my comfort zone too. So, and the Joker and his joke troopers are declaring war on Gotham, and Gentleman Jim Gordon, has to stand up to them. Batgirl joins the fight. And now the next story was another 3-parter, but this time I put the, superhero stuff up front, and then the Wonder Twins story was the next 2 pages to fill out that 3-parter. So part of my idea was that I was going to make Flipper Dipper from Jack Kirby's second version of the Newsboy Legion, his 1970s Fourth World version of the Newsboy Legion. I was going to make Flipper Dipper one of the central characters of the story, and I kind of his whole scuba outfit, I thought you could kind of hype up into almost like a Nick Fury kind of outfit, and and again, so he's, going swimming underwater, finds this sort of like, gate to the the Greco-Roman underworld, which is, sort of connected to the sort of Shazam pantheon, the Captain Marvel pantheon. And, and so then now we cut to the story of Captain Marvel Jr. being sort of, crucified on the Rock of Eternity. And, he shouts, Captain Marvel, which is his word that he says to change back and forth from Captain Marvel Jr. to Freddie Freeman, back to Captain Marvel Jr. Now, another thing I was sort of told by editorial was that they were phasing out the whole idea of that character being Captain Marvel. And he was, he was no longer going to be referred to as Captain Marvel or Captain Marvel Jr. He was going to be referred to as Shazam, or I guess Shazam Jr. And so his, because again, Marvel, that's the name of the competition. So, maybe eliminate that name from the comic. And so I thought it would be fun to have sort of a redacted thing in there. So I made like, sort of like a Sharpie redaction of Captain Marvel, blacking out the Marvel part, which you can still read through the redaction. I like this idea of redactions that you can still read through. And I was kind of thinking of a famous all-star Batman and Robin issue that Frank Miller did, where he had all kinds of like, curse words, fuck, shit, all kinds of stuff in there, but they were blacked out. They were redacted. But there was a mistake in the printing process. So although they were blacked out and redacted, you could still read them through the black line. So I thought, okay, I'll do something like that here. So, Captain Marvel Jr. turns into Freddie Freeman, and it's not helping him at all. He's still sort of, chained to this rock, and he drops one of his crutches, and that crutch falls to earth. And that was going to become part of, another plot thread down the line of Batgirl and Supergirl discovering Freddie Freeman's crutch and sort of, but anyway, connecting the two stories, Flipper Dipper finds himself in the cave of Shazam. Somehow this cave through the Greco-Roman underworld with Cerberus leads him to the Rock of Infinity, and he's walking down that sort of famous passageway that we've seen in a million Shazam stories with the statues of the 7 deadly sins, but one of them is missing. The statue of hatred is missing. And again, that was going to be a plot that was going to, develop throughout the series. That hatred was loose, and that it was this giant sort of Kirby-esque monster that was devastating the universe and was going to be some big existential threat. So this was just like a little foreshadowing of that. Flipper Dipper takes a torch, lights the brazier, and Shazam appears. The ghost of Shazam appears, and I drew him as sort of like a Shazam skeleton. Again, I'm playing with the visual language of these characters. These are characters that I've been reading and thinking about pretty much my entire life. I mean, when I was a kid, I had this big Shazam coloring book, and so I watched the Saturday morning show, the live action show, and also the animated show. So this stuff has been swirling around in my mind my entire life, and I have a lot to say about it. And so, instead of talking, the ghost of Shazam scratches with his skeleton fingertip into the stone a message to Flipper Dipper. The deadliest of man's 7 enemies has broken free and does the will of the dark god. And so then the last thing in here was a panel wrote Who's Who, which was sort of a double thing. It's also it's Who's Who, the famous DC Who's Who, little, backstories about the various characters in DC Comics. But then also you have a choo-choo train, so it can almost be the sound effect of Who's Who. And this was an idea I had. I couldn't use the Scott-free Mr. Miracle, the sort of famous Mr. Miracle. So I thought, again, maybe one way to approach this series is to sort of do the prehistory of the DC universe, the prehistory of these famous characters, the prehistory of Kirby's DC characters. And so the prehistory would be, let me explore the life of Thaddeus Brown, the first Mr. Miracle, who we only really see during Kirby's run in the first issue of Mr. Miracle. He's had this whole career as Mr. Miracle, the escape artist, and he hands off his act to the young Scott Free, and then we don't really see anything from him, at least not in the Kirby run. So I thought it was a blank slate for me. So I thought maybe there's like an interesting story I can tell with him to make him a really interesting character in his own right. So I thought of him sort of being an escape artist, a very colorful escape artist with this colorful act, and I thought of the era that he would be in. Being in World War II Europe with this circus train, populated with clowns and jugglers and animals. This whole train that he rides through Europe, that he uses as cover to get people out of Nazi occupied Europe. And again, I've done a lot of work on this. There's a lot of pages of comics that the world's never seen. Regarding this, but this is just the one bit of it that made it into the into Superpowers. This sort of standalone panel, sort of telling the whole story, the Wonder Twins story. And Gleek is sick. He has a case of simian melancholia. It's been diagnosed, and they realize that he's sort of depressed because he's away. He needs to be with his kind. He needs to be with other Exorian space monkeys. Here's where we first see the connection between the Wonder Twins story and the Earth superhero story, and they're watching a pyramid holovid of Batgirl having her adventures while they're in their sedan being carried by these robots whose design I took from Kirby. These robots sort of carrying them through the Exorian forest, and I just had this thought of sort of like Barrel of Monkeys or something, just this sea of bright blue monkeys sort of climbing through jungle ruins. And Gleek is they tell him, okay, Gleek, you're with your people, go join them, but they all sort of turn their back on Gleek. He's a little too civilized. He's they don't accept him as one of their own, and so one of them roars at Gleek, and this kind of nasty looking scarred version of an Exorian space monkey, and they reject him, and so the Wonder Twins take him back and sort of that his place is with them. They are a family. This concludes part 1 of my 3-part series, Deconstructing. Join me next time where I'll talk about the next 6 pages, which would be parts 3 and 4 of the comic. I'll see you then.